The mausoleum that wouldn't let her die. Rome is outside the door, but the first horror is inside the tomb. Cleopatra doesn't fear death tonight. She fears being kept alive on purpose. Because the empire isn't coming to kill her, it's coming to own her. The blood is still warm on her hands when the marble floor begins to feel like ice. Inside the mausoleum near the Temple of Isis, the air is thick with incense that cannot hide the copper sting of fresh death. Cleopatra kneels where the torchlight fails, her robes darkened to the waist, her fingers red to the wrists, and the weight in her arms is the only thing anchoring her to the world. Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony to the poets who will later polish his disgrace, has died against her chest, after an hour of choking breaths and fading strength, his sword wound refusing to grant him the mercy of speed. He came to her not as a general, but as a broken man hauled through a narrow window like contraband, lifted by ropes, because she would not open the doors. Because opening the doors would have meant capture, and capture would have meant Rome's hands on her throat. The tomb is locked from inside, sealed like a promise, and outside it the Roman voices multiply, calm, confident, arguing not about whether they will take her, but how to do it without damaging what they came for. They do not speak like soldiers hunting a desperate queen. They speak like accountants measuring a vault. Cleopatra listens and understands what the romantic myth never dares to say aloud. She is no longer being treated as an enemy. She is being treated as a commodity. Octavian needs Egypt's gold to pay his armies. He needs Egypt's grain to control Rome. He needs Egypt's symbolism to end a civil war with a story so clean the Senate will applaud while the streets cheer. And he needs one thing more than treasure. He needs Cleopatra alive long enough for her to become a spectacle, a living proof that the East can be made to kneel. That is why the pounding at the doors is careful. That is why no fire arrows fly through the windows. That is why, even now, while Antony's body cools and her attendants weep behind pillars, she can feel the shape of the trap closing around her. She built this mausoleum to burn, to take her wealth with her in a last act of control. But Rome has surrounded it like men guarding a warehouse, and the first rule of plunder is simple: do not let the prize destroy itself. For 3 days she has been preparing to die on her own terms, and for 3 days her terms have been quietly revoked. The smoke drifting through the high openings is not her funeral pyre. It is Alexandria collapsing beyond these walls. Harbor fires, shouted orders, the muffled chaos of a city realizing the gods have changed sides. Cleopatra has ruled since she was a teenager, has outlived siblings and betrayals and famines, has sat on thrones beneath gold ceilings while priests called her Isis made flesh. She has watched Romans cross her palace floors like hungry wolves, watched love become leverage, watched alliances rot into liabilities. She has survived by controlling the stage. Tonight, the stage is gone. Tonight, she is a woman in a locked chamber holding a dead man while strangers decide what to do with her body. Then the voices outside shift, and a new sound threads through them: movement, positioning, the measured patience of professionals. Cleopatra's hand drifts toward the small dagger at her belt, not in dramatic defiance, but with the quiet clarity of a prisoner who recognizes the moment before the net tightens. Yet even this, she realizes, may already be anticipated. Octavian knows she will choose death. He has known it for months. He has read her like a strategy scroll, and he has prepared the countermeasure. Do not rush. Do not threaten. Do not provoke. Delay her. Distract her. Keep her talking.
keep her hoping, keep her alive. The empire's cruelest weapon is not steel, it is time. The pounding stops. For a heartbeat, there is only the hiss of torches and Antony's final stillness. Then a voice of begrading speaks, smooth as a promise, offering negotiation, offering safety, offering terms too vague to be real. Cleopatra does not answer with relief. She answers with suspicion, because she can hear the real plan in the spaces between his words. Somewhere outside, boots begin to move away from the door and toward the window, the same window they used to pull Antony inside. And Cleopatra understands with a cold shock that fractures her grief into something sharper, that Rome learned the way in from her own desperation. She tightens her grip on the dagger, breathing shallow, eyes fixed on the dark opening above. Because if the window is breached, she won't be captured by force, she'll be captured by design. And in the next few moments, the mausoleum she built to control her ending will become the first chamber of her unmaking.
Taken alive, not saved. Rome doesn't break the door. It slips through the silence. Cleopatra reaches for death and discovers it has been forbidden. The empire has decided her body is worth more alive than dead. The moment comes without ceremony, without the clash of steel she expected, and that is the first true shock. While Cleopatra speaks through the grating, measuring every word, promising nothing, trusting nothing, the plan unfolds with professional calm. Footsteps circle, hands grip stone. A shadow crosses the narrow window high above, and before she can turn, before the dagger can find its mark, the mausoleum is no longer sealed. Men are inside, quiet, efficient, trained not to panic when confronting a woman history will later call a legend. One of her attendants cries out, the sound sharp with terror, and Cleopatra moves at last, driving the blade toward her chest, not in drama, but in reflex, because control is slipping and death is the only lever left to pull. She does not reach it. Strong hands seize her wrists, the dagger skitters across marble. Fingers search her hair, her robes, her skin, stripping dignity with the same care used to inventory treasure. This is not a rescue. It is a seizure. She is alive. That is the verdict. Alive and furious and shaking, dragged not to a dungeon, but back into the mausoleum itself, now repurposed from sanctuary to holding chamber. Guards take positions. Orders are whispered. Eyes never leave her. Cleopatra understands at once that the rules have changed. Suicide is no longer a choice. It is a problem Rome intends to solve by force. The men who stand watch do not threaten her. They watch her breathe. They watch her eat. They watch her sleep. Every movement is catalogued. Every object she touches is suspect. This is how Octavian wins, not by killing enemies, but by managing them. Outside, the city falls into order with terrifying speed. Alexandria is spared the sack not out of mercy but strategy. The greatest city in the Mediterranean is too valuable to ruin, too symbolic to scar. Octavian enters as a caretaker, not a conqueror, and while proclamations echo through the streets promising stability, Cleopatra waits. Days passing like slow poison, kept deliberately in ignorance. No news of her children, no word of Antony's body, no certainty of what comes next. The waiting is the point. Power is not only the ability to decide, it is the ability to delay and watch what delay does to a person. When Octavian finally comes, he does not arrive like a man meeting a rival. He arrives like an auditor inspecting an asset. Cleopatra is ill by then, exhausted, half-starved, her body marked by grief and neglect. And the ancient sources agree on the details that matter. She throws herself at his feet, hair unbound, voice unsteady, reading letters from Julius Caesar as if parchment can resurrect favor.
She tries the weapons that once worked: lineage, memory, intimacy. Octavian gives her nothing. He is young, composed, and chillingly empty of reaction. His answers are smooth and meaningless. Be of cheer. No harm will come to you. He promises nothing she can hold. And in that moment, Cleopatra understands the real sentence has already been passed. She is not being judged, she is being scheduled. After he leaves, the prison tightens. Guards double. Food is inspected. Sleep is interrupted. Even illness is allowed to fester, because suffering that does not kill is useful. The method is simple and devastating. Deny her certainty, deny her agency, deny her even the dignity of choosing when to end. Rome does not need chains. Rome needs time. And time is applied like pressure to a wound that never closes. Then the message comes, the first blade aimed not at her body, but at her heart. Her eldest son, Caesarion, has been captured, 17 years old. Son of Julius Caesar by her claim, a living challenge to Octavian's legitimacy by Rome's logic. The terms are implied, not spoken. If the boy lives, a rival lives. If the rival lives, Octavian's empire begins with a crack. Cleopatra is given no formal choice, because choices are a courtesy. She is given information, parceled carefully, and told to wait. She waits. And with each hour, the truth sharpens into something unbearable. This captivity is not a pause before mercy, it is a corridor leading to a single destination: Rome. A triumph, chains, applause. Her body turned into proof. Cleopatra's breath grows shallow as the plan reveals itself not as rumor, but as architecture. And somewhere beyond these walls, her children are being repositioned on the board. By the time she realizes that death will have to be stolen, not chosen, Octavian has already decided which life must be erased first, and the order is about to be carried out.
The cold audience of power. She kneels before a man who does not hate her. He does not desire her, fear her, or even judge her. He studies her the way an empire studies a problem. Cleopatra realizes too late that Octavian's greatest weapon is not cruelty, but emptiness. When he returns to see her again, there is no rage in his eyes, no triumph, no hunger for revenge. He does not shout, he does not threaten, he does not touch her. He stands at a measured distance, hands folded, posture relaxed, listening as if to a minor official reporting on a matter already decided. Cleopatra speaks carefully now, every word chosen like a coin weighed for purity, because she understands she is not pleading for herself alone. She speaks of Egypt, of stability, of the chaos that will follow if her children are destroyed. She speaks of loyalty, of alliances, of the future Rome could have with her cooperation. She offers abdication. She offers obedience. She offers silence. And with each offer, Octavian gives her nothing in return but vague assurances that slide away the moment she tries to grasp them. This is the moment her past beliefs collapse. For 20 years, Cleopatra has survived by reading men, by understanding desire, pride, fear, and vanity, by turning those instincts into leverage. Caesar wanted legitimacy. Antony wanted glory. Both wanted her. Octavian wants none of these things. He wants order. He wants control. He wants a story Rome can tell itself about why it deserves to rule the world. Cleopatra, once the center of the stage, is now a prop waiting to be positioned. When she finally says the words aloud, "I will not be led in triumph," she expects resistance, anger, something she can fight. Octavian does not react. He neither agrees nor denies. He simply leaves. And in that silence, the truth lands with crushing force. Her refusal does not matter. After the audience, the prison changes shape again. The guards are closer, their vigilance sharper.
Even grief is regulated. Cleopatra is allowed to see her younger children, not as comfort, but as reminder. Each visit is brief, supervised, precise. The twins are confused, clinging to her robes, asking questions she cannot answer. The youngest barely understands what has happened, only that his mother's arms feel tighter than before. Cleopatra memorizes their faces, because memory is becoming the only thing Rome cannot seize. Each goodbye is engineered to wound. Each reunion is a blade twisted slowly, methodically, until hope itself becomes a liability. Then comes the silence about Caesarion. No confirmation, no denial, only delay. Cleopatra understands this too. Uncertainty is a form of torture refined by states that prefer clean hands. If she knows her son is dead, she may act recklessly. If she believes he might live, she will endure anything to protect that possibility. Rome lets her endure. Days pass, her body weakens. Infection spreads where she struck herself in grief. Food tastes like ash. Sleep fractures into moments interrupted by footsteps and whispered checks to ensure she still breathes. She is not being kept alive for mercy. She is being kept alive for timing. Octavian's calculation is flawless. He will parade her in Rome, the last pharaoh in chains, the living symbol of the East subdued by discipline and law. The Senate will applaud. The people will cheer. Egypt's gold will pay for the spectacle. Cleopatra's body will justify an empire. And if she resists, if she finds a way to die too soon, then the calculation fails. So Rome anticipates every method. Blades are removed, poisons searched for, even grief is monitored. Cleopatra understands now that death will not be granted, it must be stolen. By the seventh day, the realization settles into her bones. The fate of her eldest son has already been decided, whether she knows it or not. Somewhere beyond these walls, a choice has been made in the language of empire, a choice that balances legitimacy against blood. Cleopatra looks at her children sleeping under guard and understands that whatever happens next will not be announced gently. It will arrive as information delivered at the worst possible moment. And as night falls on Alexandria, a messenger is prepared, carrying news designed not to kill her outright, but to finish breaking what remains.
Children as currency. Rome discovers the most efficient weapon is not steel, but a mother's fear. No chains are shown, no blows struck, only futures rearranged in silence. This is how an empire purchases obedience without paying mercy. The message does not arrive with ceremony, because ceremony would imply respect, and Cleopatra is no longer owed even that. It comes as information delivered carefully, stripped of emotion, calibrated to wound without provoking collapse. Caesarion has been intercepted on the road south, turned back by men who spoke softly and promised safety they never intended to provide. 17 years old, old enough to understand betrayal, old enough to be dangerous by lineage alone, he has been returned not as a prisoner to be displayed, but as a problem to be eliminated. Octavian does not need to tell Cleopatra this directly. The structure of the moment says enough. She is informed that Rome recognizes only one Caesar, that too many heirs invite chaos, and that words spoken now, publicly, clearly, could still shape outcomes. The implication is as precise as a blade placed at the throat without pressure applied. Deny the boy's parentage, erase the claim that threatens Octavian's legitimacy, and perhaps the killing can be framed as unnecessary. Cleopatra listens, face still, hands folded, understanding that this is not negotiation, but theater designed to force her into complicity. If she speaks, she participates in the erasure of her son. If she refuses, the erasure proceeds without her consent. Either way, Rome wins.
The days that follow are a study in controlled cruelty. Cleopatra is permitted to see her younger children again, not to comfort her, but to make the cost visible. The twins are brought in together, guarded closely, their curiosity dulled by fear they do not yet know how to name. They ask about their brother. Cleopatra cannot answer. She holds them anyway, memorizing weight, warmth, breath, because memory has become a form of resistance. The youngest clings without understanding, trusting the one person in the room who cannot protect him. Each visit ends abruptly. Each goodbye is framed as temporary. Rome understands how hope prolongs suffering better than despair ever could. Outside the mausoleum, the machinery of empire moves with impersonal efficiency. Inventories are completed, gold is counted, ships are prepared. Octavian's triumph is being planned down to the order of march, and Cleopatra's place in it is not in doubt. The question is only whether she will arrive breathing. Guards rotate more frequently now. Food is tasted, clothing is searched seam by seam, even hairpins are examined. Rome has learned from her attempts and adjusted. She is allowed to weaken, but not to end. She is allowed to grieve, but not to choose. This is the balance Octavian maintains: suffering sufficient to break resistance, survival sufficient to preserve spectacle. Then the silence about Caesarion breaks, not with confirmation, but with finality. The boy has been executed. The method is not described, the location is not named. There will be no tomb, no marker, no place to mourn. Too many Caesars, Octavian reportedly says, as if a line of poetry can launder murder into necessity. Cleopatra receives the news as one receives a physical blow after days of anticipation. The impact is less sharp than the understanding that follows. Her eldest is gone, removed not because of what he did, but because of what he represented, a future canceled for administrative convenience. The empire has made its first irreversible cut. The effect is immediate and precisely what Rome intended. Something inside Cleopatra finally gives way, not in screams, but in a hollowing that leaves her dangerously calm. She stops eating almost entirely. Sleep becomes a series of shallow collapses interrupted by guards checking for breath. The infection on her chest worsens. No physician is summoned in haste. Pain that does not kill is useful. Octavian's calculation assumes she will now cling to the remaining children, that maternal instinct will anchor her to life long enough for transport. He underestimates what desperation does when every path leads to the same humiliation. Cleopatra understands the pattern now with terrible clarity. One child has been erased to remove a claim. The others will be preserved as symbols, marched in chains where she was meant to walk, trophies to complete a narrative she cannot escape by obedience. Rome has converted her family into currency, spending one to secure legitimacy and saving the rest for display. There will be no mercy, because mercy introduces uncertainty, only management. By the 11th day, the guards notice a change. Cleopatra is quieter, more compliant, asking fewer questions, conserving energy. This is not surrender. This is preparation. She has learned from Rome's methods and is adjusting her own. If death is forbidden, it must be concealed. If choice is denied, it must be stolen. Somewhere within reach, overlooked by routine, there is still a flaw in the system. And as night settles over Alexandria, Cleopatra begins to test that flaw, knowing that the next attempt will be her last chance and that Rome will race to stop her once the signal is sent.
The death that had to be stolen. Rome guards her body like treasure, not like a prisoner. Every blade is removed, every cup tasted, every breath counted. So Cleopatra turns secrecy itself into a weapon. By the 11th day, Cleopatra no longer fights the routine imposed on her. She eats when food is brought, drinks when ordered, submits to searches without protest, and answers questions with the dull obedience of someone finally broken. This is exactly what Octavian's men expect to see. They believe despair has finished its work, that grief has drained the last will from a woman whose world has been dismantled piece by piece. They do not understand that Cleopatra has simply learned Rome's language. Survival has taught her that open resistance invites control, but compliance invites neglect, and neglect creates gaps. An empire that prides itself on efficiency often assumes the work is done too early. The guards are careful, but care follows patterns, and patterns can be studied. Meals are inspected for poison, but not dismantled entirely. Clothing is searched, but only where weapons are expected. Even the human body, watched constantly, is still allowed small private moments, bathing, dressing, sleeping, because total surveillance exhausts those who enforce it. Cleopatra notices these moments accumulating like grains of sand. She understands now that death will not come as a dramatic act, but as an act of logistics, requiring timing, misdirection, and speed. The famous story that later circulates, the asp hidden in a basket of figs, the sacred serpent delivering a divine end, is beautiful precisely because it simplifies what was in reality frantic and uncertain. The ancient sources themselves hesitate, contradicting one another, because no one truly knew how she did it. That uncertainty is the point. Cleopatra could not rely on ceremony. She could not rely on myth. She needed something small, concealable, and fast. A poison carried where guards would not expect it. A method that could work before anyone realized what was happening. Before acting, she sends a message to Octavian. The words are careful, restrained, almost polite. She asks only one thing: permission to be buried beside Antony. It is not a request for mercy, but a signal. Octavian, trained to read intent, understands what it means the moment he receives it. He orders men to run. He orders speed. But even this reaction proves Cleopatra has calculated correctly. Rome is fast, but not instantaneous. Messages travel, doors open, bodies move, and in that narrow window between intention and interception, she acts. What happens next is described differently by every source, and that confusion has allowed centuries of romantic invention to flourish. Plutarch admits no one knew for certain. Cassius Dio offers possibilities, not facts. No swelling, no clear wound, no obvious serpent. Only two faint marks, perhaps. Perhaps a poisoned pin. Perhaps a compound smuggled in plain sight. What matters is not the instrument, but the context. Cleopatra dies racing against men stationed to prevent her from dying, using whatever means she has left before they can stop her again. This is not a calm surrender. It is an escape attempted under constant surveillance. When Octavian's men reach her chambers, they are already too late. Cleopatra lies on a golden couch, dressed deliberately, crowned not for Rome, but for herself, reclaiming in death the authority denied her in life. At her feet lies Iris, already dead. Charmian is still alive, swaying, using her last strength not to beg, not to curse, but to adjust the crown's queen, refusing even now to let Rome see disorder. When a Roman officer remarks on the act, Charmian answers with her final breath that it is fitting for one descended from kings. Then she collapses. The room falls silent. Octavian arrives to a problem he can no longer solve. Cleopatra is dead, not when he wanted, not how he planned, but just late enough to secure Egypt, and just early enough to deny him his greatest trophy. He allows the burial beside Antony, not out of compassion, but because denying it serves no further purpose. The spectacle he desired has slipped through his fingers, but the campaign is not over. Cleopatra's body may be gone, but her legacy is still vulnerable.
As her tomb is sealed and the city absorbs the news, Rome turns its attention to what remains alive and what must now be erased to finish the victory. Because Cleopatra's death was never the end of the punishment, it was only the transition to something quieter, colder, and far more permanent.
The erasure after death. Cleopatra escapes the chains, but not the punishment. Rome allows her burial, then destroys everything that could remember her. This is how empires finish what death cannot. Cleopatra's body is laid to rest beside Antony as requested, and to later generations this permission will be mistaken for mercy. It is not. By the time the tomb is sealed, Octavian has already moved past the dead queen to the more important task of controlling what survives her. Death has solved one problem. The triumph will not feature Cleopatra in chains, but it has created another. Legends are dangerous. Martyrs inspire memory. Memory inspires resistance. Rome's answer is not rage or spectacle, but administration. Cleopatra will not be honored or openly condemned. She will be dismantled quietly, piece by piece, until nothing recognizable remains. The work begins with her children. Caesarion, already erased, is justified with a line twisted into policy. Too many Caesars are dangerous. There will be no grave, no inscription, no acknowledgement that the boy ever ruled Egypt or carried Caesar's blood. His existence becomes a rumor without proof. The 3 younger children are spared, not out of kindness, but because they are useful alive. They are marched in Octavian's triumph through Rome, small bodies weighed down with chains meant for their mother, living symbols of conquest paraded before cheering crowds who do not know their names. Cleopatra's absence makes the display more powerful, not less. Rome does not need her alive to humiliate her. It only needs her lineage. After the triumph, the children vanish into controlled obscurity. They are handed to Octavia, the Roman wife Antony abandoned, raised among the family of the man who destroyed their parents. The boys disappear from the historical record within a few years, no deaths recorded, no achievements noted. They fade the way inconvenient facts fade under empires, without explanation. Only Cleopatra Selene survives to adulthood, married off to rule a minor client kingdom far from Egypt, permitted to live only because distance and obedience make her harmless. Even then, she preserves her mother's memory in fragments, Egyptian symbols, dynastic names, small acts of defiance that Rome tolerates because they no longer matter. Egypt itself is transformed. It is not governed like other provinces. It becomes the personal property of the emperor, locked away from ambitious senators, its grain feeding Rome, its gold paying legions, its wealth underwriting an empire that will last centuries. Everything Cleopatra fought to protect is absorbed seamlessly into the system that defeated her. The temples she built are rededicated. Her cartouches are chiseled out. Statues are torn down or altered. Her face disappears from public space. The mausoleum where she died vanishes, destroyed, repurposed, or swallowed by the changing city. Even today, no one knows where she lies, an unmarked queen in a civilization obsessed with monuments. In Rome, the narrative hardens. Cleopatra becomes a warning rather than a ruler. The foreign seductress, the dangerous woman, the Eastern corruption that threatened Roman order. This version is safe. It justifies conquest. It flatters power. It erases complexity. The truth that she endured prolonged captivity, psychological torture, the calculated murder of her son, and the systematic dismantling of her world is buried beneath poetry and theater, because empires prefer myths that comfort victors over realities that expose method. Octavian becomes Augustus Caesar, founder of a new age, praised for bringing peace after chaos. His reign is remembered for stability, law, and order.
Cleopatra's suffering is footnote, her desperation romanticized, her resistance reduced to a single dramatic death scene that distracts from the machinery that made it inevitable. History remembers the asp because it is beautiful. It forgets the waiting because waiting is uncomfortable to examine. It forgets the days when death was denied on purpose. It forgets how carefully Rome managed despair. And that is the final horror. Cleopatra did not lose only her life, she lost control of her story. Her memory was shaped by the very power that destroyed her, filtered through centuries of repetition until the edges of truth dulled and the cruelty vanished behind art. What survives is not what happened, but what was allowed to be remembered. The ruins of Alexandria lie partly underwater now. Statues of her world rest on the seabed. Coins bearing her face outlasted her name. Somewhere, perhaps forever lost, is the place where she was buried beside Antony, hidden well enough that even modern archaeology cannot find it. This absence is not accidental. It is the final success of Rome's campaign. Because Cleopatra's real defeat did not occur in the mausoleum, or in the guarded chamber, or even in death. It occurred afterward, when the empire proved it could kill a queen once and then kill her again by deciding what the world would never be allowed to know.